Hey guys, and welcome back to Gabbing with Jessa. Well, we have made it. We are at the end, except this is going to be two parts because that's how the movie was. We've made it to Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, the very last book in the J.K. Rowling Harry Potter series. Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows is a 2007 novel that completed the series. We finally get to figure out what happens in the end between Harry and Voldemort and just the journey, how it took to get there. Now, I was gonna try to have this video be one so I could talk about it in one just shot for one book, but you know what? They decided to split the movie up, or the book up into two, so that's how I'm gonna do it. The first video will be focusing on movie one of this, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1, while the second video that I post will be about Part 2. There will be spoilers for this book, and just to be on the safe side, we're gonna make it for the full book and both of the movies, just to be safe. So if you haven't read the book or seen either of the movies, I would click off and then you can come back and join us. To start off, I think that it was a really good idea to split this up into two. Yes, it is smaller than the biggest book that we have, but I think because you don't want to disappoint people, this is the last chance you're gonna have to impress your fans, to make them happy. I think it was a really good idea to split this up into two. It started a trend of splitting final books up into two movies, which, while for some I think was needed and you could have seen it doing it, there were others where I didn't see that. I think that the first movie was actually very good, playing up to the first half of this book, because I know a lot of complaints that people get is that it is way too slow in this movie, but the thing is, it was really slow in the first half of the book. You're not gonna have a whole lot of action. You need to be finding the Horcruxes. That is what we are doing. That is our mission. And especially if you don't know where they are, it's going to be slow. You're gonna have to travel and things like that. So I think that the movie did a really good job of capturing the first part of this book. But that doesn't mean that it was perfect, so let's talk about it. So we get no explanation of the mirror that Sirius gave Harry for his birthday in movie or book 5. Like, it becomes a very important part at the end of this movie, and we just kind of see the little shard of it. Like, and that's it. Throughout this book, we do learn a lot about Dumbledore's history. Now, book 6 focused on Voldemort's history, although the movie didn't, but this book focuses on Dumbledore's history, and while there are moments throughout the movie of this mentioning, there's a lot of positives and negatives that we learn from Dumbledore's life. In the beginning of the book, it's more of the positives because of Alpheus Doge, but then we learn through Rita Skeeter's book and like some other people along the way, he didn't have the cleanest history. At some point towards the very end of the first half of this book, Harry's really questioning Dumbledore. He really doesn't know if he should trust him anymore. And I think that was a really big focus on the first half of this book. And I think that it was a good twist to kind of add in there that, hey, just because someone seems perfect for the first 6 years that you've known them doesn't mean that they are. I think one of the most impactful scenes that we don't get in the book, it's mentioned that it happened, but that we don't actually see, is Hermione obliviating her parents. It's like the first scene we get right out of the gate, and it's so impactful, and I think that it's so well done. Emma Watson did a great job during this scene. The ending for the Dursleys was okay. I mean, are we surprised? No. But one thing that I really liked that was actually a deleted scene that didn't really happen in the book was Petunia and Harry having this talk, and they mention her sister, and Petunia's like, you didn't just lose a mother that night, I lost a sister. Whereas in the book, it seems like Petunia wants to say that, but she actually just runs away. But in the movie, they included this, and I really like that. I think it shows us that Petunia, even though she, with her history of her sister, which we find out in the second half of the book, is not the best, they were still sisters. And I really like that. I wish the movie kept that in. I kind of wish to look at it too. I don't know, just something to wrap them up. And I think there was a deleted scene with Dudley, you know, saying you know, I don't think you're a waste of space. It was very nice in the book. It was just kind of awkward in the movie, which is why they probably cut it. The 7 Potters scene, Daniel Radcliffe was the best. Sometimes I'm watching it and I forget that it's not the actors like in Dan's disguise. It's Dan acting as all of them. I think it's fantastic. It's fantastic. Hedwig in the movie, I think it's a very much more heroic death than she does in the book, because in the book she's just chilling in her cage and she gets hit with a killing curse, whereas in the movie she goes and she protects Harry from one of the Death Eaters that's after him, and then they kill her. And like that's kind of like the reason why it gave Harry away to Voldemort when they were all chasing him of who was the real Harry. And so I really like that. I really like that in the movie. Now, instead of going right to the Burrow, we're actually going to Tonks's parents' house. This is where we meet Tonks's parents for the first time. And we learn about the history with Tonks's mother, who is Bellatrix and Narcissa's sister. So of course there's a little tension there. She was the one who got away from the family because she didn't marry a pureblood wizard. She married a muggle-born wizard, Tonks's father. We get to the Burrow because of a hairbrush Porky, which I still really like, you know, seeing the Porkies, throwing a little bit of, you know, book 4 back into the mix, and then we end up at the Burrow. One thing that I thought was really interesting in this is that Mrs. Weasley, again, even though she knows that the trio is going to go off, they're not going to school, they are going to explore, look for Horcruxes, Mrs. Weasley, like she was doing in book 5, still tries to keep them apart, like in preparations for the wedding. She gives them separate tasks to do, and I think that's, again, very motherly of her, even though she, you know, knows deep down that they're doing this. She's trying to not accept it, and she's still trying to keep them apart. While I was rereading this, there was a lot more planning. We see a lot more of the planning process throughout this book. And while, you know, that's very boring to think about, you know, translating that to the screen, it's still really fun and really interesting to see the process of how they think and how they're going to go about everything. Also, Harry finally gets a good birthday. We finally get to see Harry celebrate his birthday. It's a big birthday because it is his coming of age birthday, and it's a lot of fun. I mean, at least they mentioned the birthday in the movie. This definitely wasn't needed, but we get a mention of how Norbert, or Norberta, from the first book, yes, the little dragon that Hagrid hatched, is 1, a female, and 2, doing well because we finally get to see Charlie. I also love how Ron decides to use the ghoul in the attic as the means of how he's getting away with not being at school. It's not needed. It's not something that really needs to be mentioned, but it's just fun. I like the ghoul in the attic. So we see Victor Crum at the wedding, and he's there because, you know, him, Fleur, Harry, and Cedric were all in the Triwizard Tournament together. And he sees the Deathly Hallows necklace that Luna's dad is wearing, and he actually gets very upset about this because he knows that it's Grindelwald's symbol, and he knows that the history with Grindelwald, he went to Durmstrang, he was expelled from Durmstrang, and he's a very, very dark wizard, and he doesn't like the fact that Luna's dad is just wearing this out in the open. So we start to learn more about who Grindelwald is, and we also get to learn more about who Gregorovitch is, the wand maker, because they keep showing up in visions of Harry throughout the book, and in the movie we do see them, but we don't really know who they are. That goes for Grindelwald and for Gregorovitch. So wedding happens, it gets, you know, interrupted by Death Eaters, they travel or whatever, and then we end up going back to Grimmauld Place because we know that is the only place where Snape is the only one who can get in there because it is protected for the Order, so no other Death Eaters can get in there. And we meet up with Kreacher, trying to figure out where Salazar Slytherin's locket is, and Kreacher has an amazing backstory. It is so heartbreaking, and it's also along with how Regulus is too. Like, it's really great, and it gives you a much deeper appreciation for Kreacher, and we see that with Harry too, how he appreciates him more as well. He's not just this grumpy old house elf, like he's got a history, man. So while we're waiting for Kreacher to fetch Mindungus, because it actually takes a few days, it's not just kind of like instantaneous that he finds him, Lupin comes. He's basically here to say, hey, Voldemort took over everything, basically. The Ministry, the media, everything. He started an anti-Muggle thing that's trying to go after Muggle-born wizards because they think that they stole their powers from wizards or whatever. He also says that, you know, it's pure blood only at Hogwarts now, and that attendance is mandatory so Voldemort can keep track of everyone. Oh, also he's pregnant with Tonks, like they have a baby on the way. And he doesn't really want to worry about that, so he wants to join the trio. This makes Harry furious because he's like, how can you leave your newborn child, like, or not even born child yet? And it makes him so mad because he doesn't think that his father would want Lupin to abandon their child. And this becomes a really big stir between Harry and Lupin, that Lupin just kind of like storms out of the house. We figure out Umbridge has the locket. We're going to the Ministry. We planned for it. And then we're sneaking into the Ministry, Harry as whoever, I forget his name. And we first go into Umbridge's office because we think, oh, that's where the locket will be. But then we see in the movie this eye that's like moving around, which looks eerily similar to Moody's eye. Well, guess what? It is Moody's eye. We get no mention of it because we just find out that Moody died back in the Seven Potters scene, and that they actually went to go look for the body but couldn't find it. Guess Umbridge found it, and she took the eye to spy in the office, and then Harry notices it, so he takes the eye, later buries it in the forest. But I think that this was something that they could have included because it would have given us a nice little memorial scene for Moody. We escape from the Ministry, we're exploring the forest, and we actually run into Dean Thomas, Ted Tonks, Griphook, and a few others who are running away from the Ministry because of the Muggle-born Registration Act, because they're afraid that they're going to have like their wands snapped or that they're going to die or something. So we actually run into them, and it is here that we figure out about the Sword of God Gryffindor, how Griphook says that a few students from Hogwarts have been trying to steal it because they, you know, want to rebel against Snape. Of course, we know that this is like Ginny, Neville, all them. We actually learned that Snape, one, does have a fake Sword of God Gryffindor, but also that the real Sword of God Gryffindor has destroyed the Marvolo Gaunt ring. So this clicks in Harry, Hermione, and Ron's heads, being like, okay, we got to get that sword because we know that it can destroy the Horcruxes once we actually find them all. So we again get a mention of the portrait of Phineas Nigellus because while we were in the Black House, Hermione actually put it into her little like Mary Poppins bag, and that is how not only how the trio is able to keep up with how things are going on at Hogwarts, because his other portrait is in the headmaster's office at Hogwarts, but it's also how Snape figures out where the trio is so he, as the Silver Doe, can go and put the Sword of God Gryffindor into the lake. It makes so much more sense of how Snape knew that they were there, and it's just like, it just doesn't make sense to me on how he would know where they were when Ron didn't even know like where they were. Like when he left and he's trying to figure out where the heck they are, like he can't find them again. But how does Snape know how to do that in the movie? Well, it's because of this portrait, and it makes so much more sense. I have a very unpopular opinion, I think, but the dancing scene really doesn't bother me between Harry and Hermione. I'm sorry, it really doesn't bother me. I think the song is really nice. Yes, it's kind of cringy, but I think that it plays to Harry and Hermione's characters. I think that they have like, you know, that brother-sister relationship connection. I think that they're really just best friends. And yes, even for a second, even though I knew how this ended up, I was getting the implication like, oh my gosh, they're gonna kiss here. And I wasn't sure how I was gonna react, but I don't know, it really doesn't bother me. We travel to Godric's Hollow so we can find Bathilda Bagshot, so we can finally look at the grave of the Potters, you know, visit where Harry is from. But Harry and Hermione in the book do this under Polyjuice Potion. While that makes sense and something that they should do for precautions, I really like in the movie how it was just them, how they went there wholly themselves. It makes for so much more tender moment when they find the grave of the Potters and just that emotion. I think it would have been weird to see two random actors that we've never seen before do this scene. So I really liked how they changed that up. During the scene, I wish we could have seen the memorial to the Potters. I wish we would have seen how they really have impacted the wizarding world. And yes, Harry knows how important they are, but I think seeing it in his hometown where he grew up for a year, I think that would have been a really nice moment, especially seeing Harry and Hermione as themselves and not disguised as anyone else. So Ron comes back, yay, whatever, we destroy the Horcrux, yay, woo. But we also find out from Ron that Voldemort actually has a taboo on his name, so that's how the Death Eaters were able to find them back in the cafe after they escaped from the wedding. It's because whenever you say Voldemort, that's when the Death Eaters and Snatchers will appear. I think it's his way of trying to, you know, locate his enemies, trying to figure out, hey, what are they up to? Why are they saying my name, kind of thing. Another thing that I like that definitely wasn't needed, well, it was kind of there in the second movie, but is the Potter Watch radio show. It's how everyone has been keeping up with what is going on, basically telling the truth against what the real wizard media is trying to tell you, being like, no, this is what's really going on, this is what is happening, and also just giving a ton of support to Harry. They all have like different code names. It's a lot of fun. Again, not needed, just fun. We get to Xenophilius's Lovegoods home, and they're asking about the Deathly Hallows symbol because now it's come up multiple times, and we get to hear the story of the tale of the three brothers. The animation during this is gorgeous. I loved the animation parts in this movie. It was so beautiful, because like, how else are you gonna tell that? I guess with actors, but because it's a story, I think it was smarter to tell it in animation, and I thought it was so beautiful. After learning about what these Hallows are, and that if you get all of them, you can be the Master of Death, and we already figured out that we got one of them, that Harry has a really big decision. He's like, should I still continue to go after the Horcruxes, or should I go after these Hallows so that I can be the Master of Death? Which makes sense of why this is called Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. It's a really big part of Harry's decision in being like, well, what should I do? Like, should I go and get these objects that will make me the Master of Death so that way I can defeat Voldemort? Or should I go and do what Dumbledore told me to do, while he's still questioning a lot about Dumbledore? And he makes the right decision knowing that his goal isn't to be the Master of Death per se, it's to take Voldemort down, and he knows that the Horcruxes are the way to do it. Draco's character arc, I think, is something that definitely wasn't done justice in the movies. We first see Draco, and he is being forced to torture the two Death Eaters that let the trio get away in the cafe after the wedding, and you can tell Harry has a vision of this, and you could tell that Draco does not want to do that, does not want to be there, it shows that Draco is really, I think, different from his parents, and that he really doesn't want to do that. But then also, when they're captured and brought to Malfoy Manor, you can tell that he recognizes it's Harry. Even with the cover-up that Hermione tried to put on, he knows that it's Harry. There is a moment where you're not sure of whether or not he's going to say it's Harry or not, and then he chooses not to. And it's Draco should have been done a little bit better in the end, is all I'm going to say. Bellatrix and Hermione's torture scene in the movie is terrifying. I heard somewhere that the director, David Yates, wanted them to actually bring it down because what they were originally doing, Emma Watson and Helena Bonham Carter, what they were originally doing was so much worse that it could have potentially gotten them like an R rating. And I was, oh my gosh, it was so terrifying. And it was great. I thought they did a great job. So one big difference that I think a lot of fans weren't a fan of was that in the movies, Peter Pettigrew never officially dies. We never see him die like the way we see him die in the movie. The director said that it would have looked a little childish the way that they killed him, which, if you're curious, it is because the silver hand that Voldemort gave him back in book 4 actually betrays him. While he's choking Harry, Harry's like, no, I saved your life. You can't do this to me. Pettigrew realizes, he's like, oh yeah, that's kind of true. And then the hand betrays him because you can never trust anything from Voldemort. And it ends up strangling himself, killing himself instead. Because a big thing is that all of the Marauders actually ended up dying during this reign of Voldemort. And that's not something we get officially confirmed in the movies. He just kind of gets hit with a spell and is like, ugh, and then falls to the floor, just kind of knocking him out or whatever. It would have been nice to see him die in some way, because technically he's supposed to be dead, but in the movies he's still alive. Dobby's death. I think is harder in the book than it is in the movie. Yes, he's a lovable character in the movie, but we only see him in movie 2. Yes, he's fun and lovable, and we see him in the beginning of this movie, but it's... Actually, either way, it hurts both ways. It really does. It just hurts. It just hurts. I really think that this was a really good spot to end the movie. We got a lot of the boring, slow stuff out of the way first, so this next movie is basically going to be all action, and that's what it is, and I think that's what was really good about splitting it up into 2. You would have had to make some sacrifices here or there so that way you can include in one movie, and 3-hour movies weren't really a thing during this time. I don't even think they could have done it during that time, so I'm really happy. I think they stopped at a really great climactic point of Voldemort getting the Elder Wand, and also the team being very humbled by Dobby's death and just ready to go. But there we go, that is the first half of my Harry Potter book versus movie for the Deathly Hallows. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, keep on gabbing.